seems to me like the Western society's lost the blueprint to this, but you've actually brought this from the Eastern world, haven't you? Which they still actually practice it by sitting properly and cross-legged and all the usual things they do in Tai Chi.
That's right. They're normal functions. In the East, you find a person quite comfortably sitting cross-legged on the floor, even in restaurants, traditional Japanese or Eastern restaurants. They kneel a lot. They use what they call the seiza position. Their natural stance, they're always relaxed and bent-legged. They try to look at the whole economy of movement very differently to the way we look at it in the West. We look at it very linearly and very Newtonian in the West, in the contraction of a muscle being the sole prime of the power for lifting or moving around. And so we strain the joints by putting too much emphasis on them, using the arms as levers and using fixed points as fulcrums. And that's not the way the muscles are actually formed around the joints or the way they actually make the joints work. So it actually becomes a great way of moving.
And this is teachable?
Oh, absolutely teachable. I mean, I learned it basically by following the movements of Dr. Hatsumi through the Budo primarily, and then being shown that those same movements could apply to the manual aspects of therapy, which I'd already researched for 10 years prior to getting that sole instruction. And absolutely it's reproducible. You don't have to follow that Budo path or the medicine path, because you can break it down into simple movements and simple principles that are easy to understand. So once you apply this principle, it becomes very different to the normal calisthenics, but you're not looking for fitness. What we're looking for is bringing out the wellness of the body, which is a totally different concept. It's one that they appreciate and encompass globally in the East, but doesn't seem to be very understood in the West.
Somebody doing it wrong, I don't know whether you could do it wrong, but could you show us somebody doing something wrong that, you know, would lead to a bad back or coming to see you and laying on that bench in the pain?
Right, well, trying to step over this, if someone was doing it wrong, they'd probably try to pick the leg up straight, as opposed to having it close to the interface. So if you rock down, you've got to be able to turn the hips in this way. And also using the spine actually propels me forward. So if I was on a thin ledge on a rock, again bringing it up like this, the spine keeps you pressed against the rock surface. I've even watched dragonflies in flight, and the end of the tip of the tail bends down slightly, depending on what flight path they're taking. Here's a dragonfly, a model representing that. The four wings, the way they're using the spine, they're guiding in, and they actually make anything that they're predating on to not see the movement patterns. They're experts at this motion camouflage, but also the long tail is a counterbalance. So that's a cantilever. This leg at this moment is also a cantilever, so you've got to understand the spinal dynamics of where your wings would be, how to use your scapulars, how to use the spinal dynamics at different levels of the spine to maintain the balance of a cantilever, to be able to turn the hips to and fro, to be able to give you this kind of flexibility. But as I say, I don't normally toe touch or stretch. I don't basically do any stretching exercises to maintain this integrity. So to do it wrong, that would be one of the first errors, and people try to lift the leg, maybe bang the knees. Weight distribution through the opposite foot is also very important. So this control, I'm actually pressing down to produce non-linear vectors of force going into the floor, which then feed back through that tensegrous system of the body. So viscoelastic able to stretch in any direction, and gives you this sort of control, so that all the time you can do these things slowly because you're in a degree of control of working the hips. Even the arms can be used as a counterbalance. So unless you trained in that properly, you would use the spinal dynamics wrong. Lifting, pulling, twisting, you could even pull from this position, you could pull something forward. Quite often when I'm working in the garden, I wouldn't be exactly in this position, but I might be down on the floor with a trowel or pulling a rock out of a rockery. You can develop power because all you're doing is applying the same pressures to the fingertips to use the spinal dynamics to draw you towards the thing you want to pull towards you, which is very different to pulling it. A frictionless load you've got to apply Newtonian type principles towards it. So any pressure will push it in the direction of the push, or the same with the pull. But with this kind of dynamics, as you pull towards, it creates a different vector of force around and produces a more mobile fulcrum to the whole weight of the object you're trying to move. So I find it very safe in the garden to use it. And again, when my clients come in, if I wanted to apply a vector of force to a person's anatomy, say I was working the Grinfeld's area of a person's back, then the elbow becomes the first contact. The body becomes the envelope that wraps it up to get the degree of pressure I want, the depth of pressure, and the direction of the vectors of the non-linear fulcrum of what I'm applying. Then I make a universal joint with this coupling, the the hands, the wrists. And again, as I move my spine, this universal coupling changes the vectors through the elbow and increases the depth and the direction change that I want to apply the work without using lots of pressure. I can apply a deep pressure to the tissue, maintain the integrity of my spine at all times, and the same with any other part of the anatomy that I'm working with. So one of the things I do in the morning when I'm waiting for a client is just, I've walked around the garden a little bit, just to prepare myself mentally and physically for my first client, is I don't do calisthenics or toe touching. Basically just check that the joints of me hips, spine, pelvis, sacrum are all like working in the way that they would naturally, and that's a tension coupled movement. So the ligaments are always moving bones that are in tandem to be able to produce movements around points in the body and achieve an economy of movement over a structure even as high as this. You can just effortlessly step over. I like to be able to check the receptors in my feet. I've already done that when I put my sock on, of course, in the morning. But by pressing on the receptors there, you're switching on the gait patterns in the pelvis, so that this leg could slowly come up and meet the other one and slowly go back down. So that's an important concept for me at that height. I don't do this every day, but I want to be able to, at that height, know I could just economically jump on to a height, that surface, or, you know, vault across it using the spine, coming back across it this way. So I play around on the couch usually before the first client comes for a few minutes in that way. The concept I see is in a voodoo situation, if you had a sword or something of that nature, then you could actually draw it while you're stepping over an obstruction, but it's not an obstruction because you can keep this middle area free while you're still propelling yourself forward with the body movement.
Excellent. And what sort of level of fitness do you need to get to that stage?
It's not about fitness, it's, again, it's not really a calisthenic. For aerobic or cardiovascular benefits, you need a good walk to increase your pulse rate and things. That's well researched. This is maintaining the integrity of the movement of the whole body as a whole. So the parts work. You know, you've got a hip that rotates, but it's not just about hip rotation. It's about spinal rotation, matching that. So when the leg's out, it's a cantilever, but the rest of the body is always maintaining its balance, integrity, and the proprioception is maintaining that balance and integrity. So you can move around in such a way that your hands are free, so you're more than paralateral. So you could be climbing on a wall or something of that nature, and your limbs could theoretically be in this position, and you're safe to bring this around, or explore, or move it around, because the whole spinal dynamics are working in such a way that they're just sending vectors of power to the fingertips, to the toes. And the body's working basically as a team, I suppose is the best way to describe it, that each part knows what the other part needs, and the tension is evenly distributed without stress throughout the whole system.